There is a behavior that many people notice, but few people question. A quiet expectation that respect must come with an edge, that presence must carry a warning, and that calmness alone is not enough to be taken seriously. And once you really see it, it starts to feel less like confidence and more like something deeper, something learned, something repeated. In this video, you are going to understand where that mindset comes from, why it keeps showing up in the same patterns across different environments, how it shapes identity without people even realizing it, and the part that most people overlook when they try to fix it. You have probably seen it without thinking too much about it. The way some men enter a room and immediately harden their expression, the way their voice drops slightly lower, the way their body language becomes more rigid, like they are preparing for something that has not even happened yet. And maybe you have felt it yourself, that subtle shift where being relaxed feels risky, where being too open feels like it might invite disrespect. So you adjust, not because you want to, but because it feels necessary. It shows up in conversations where tone becomes more important than content, where being loud or intimidating carries more weight than being thoughtful. It shows up in friendships where vulnerability is avoided because it could be seen as weakness. And it shows up in environments where respect is not freely given. It is negotiated through presence, through dominance, through the ability to make others think twice before crossing you. This is not random behavior. It is a pattern, a psychological adaptation, where respect becomes tied to perceived threat, where being seen as harmless is interpreted as being overlooked, and where the line between confidence and intimidation becomes blurred over time. When someone grows in an environment where respect is inconsistent or easily taken away, the brain starts to prioritize protection over connection. It starts asking a different question. Not how do I build relationships, but how do I make sure no one tries me? And that shift changes everything, because now every interaction carries a layer of defense, even when it is not needed. Psychologically, this is rooted in survival conditioning. When the mind repeatedly experiences situations where being passive leads to negative outcomes, it adapts by increasing intensity, by becoming more alert, more guarded, more ready to respond. And over time, that readiness becomes identity. It no longer feels like a choice. It feels like who you are. The problem is that the brain does not always update its rules when the environment changes. So even when someone moves into spaces where aggression is not required, the same patterns continue, the same energy is carried. Because the mind is still operating on old data, still trying to solve problems that are no longer there in the same way. To really understand this, you have to look at the wider context, not just individual behavior, but collective experience. Generations of navigating environments where respect had to be earned in harder ways, where showing strength was not just a personality trait, but a necessity, where vulnerability could be exploited and where reputation could determine safety. Over time, those experiences shape culture. They shape expectations. They create unspoken rules about how a man should carry himself, how he should respond to disrespect, how quickly he should escalate. And those rules get passed down, sometimes directly, sometimes just through observation, through what is rewarded and what is punished. And this is where it becomes complicated, because what starts as protection can slowly become a limitation. When being feared becomes the primary way to gain respect, it can close doors that require a different kind of presence. It can affect relationships that need trust rather than tension. And it can create isolation without it being obvious. It can lead to situations where people comply rather than connect, where they respect the boundary but not the person, where interactions become transactional instead of genuine. And over time, that can create a feeling that something is missing, even if everything looks strong on the surface. Most people assume the issue is simple. They think it is just about attitude or personality. But the reality is deeper. It is about conditioning, environment, and the meanings attached to behavior. It is about what respect represents in different contexts and how those meanings shape identity. there are a few key insights that start to reveal what is really going on beneath the surface. One is that what looks like confidence is often a form of defense. It is not always about feeling secure. It is about making sure others do not test you. Another is that calmness is often misunderstood. It can be seen as weakness in certain environments, even though it actually requires more control. And another is that aggression is not always about dominance. Sometimes it is about fear of being disrespected, fear of being overlooked, fear of losing status. Another insight is that respect based on fear is unstable. It requires constant maintenance, constant reinforcement. Because the moment that edge disappears, the dynamic can shift. And another is that true respect operates differently. It is not forced, it is built. It comes from consistency, from self-control, from how someone moves when there is nothing to prove. When you put all of this together, the real issue becomes clearer. It is not just about individual choices. It is about patterns that were formed for survival and then carried forward without being questioned. It is about a mindset that equates respect with intimidation and a system that sometimes reinforces that belief. But here is where things can shift, because once you recognize the pattern, you are no longer fully controlled by it. You can start to separate what is necessary from what is automatic. You can start to ask yourself whether every situation truly requires that level of intensity, or whether it is just a habit playing itself out. A practical shift begins with awareness, noticing when you are tensing up, when your tone changes, when your body prepares for conflict that is not there, and then making a deliberate choice to respond differently. Not by becoming passive, but by becoming more precise, more intentional. Another shift is redefining what respect means to you, moving away from the idea that it has to be taken through force and towards the idea that it can be built through presence, through boundaries that are firm but not aggressive, through communication that is clear without being hostile. It also involves learning control, not just physical control, but emotional control. The ability to stay steady even when challenged. The ability to choose your response rather than react automatically. Because real strength is not just about how intense you can be. It is about how composed you can remain. And finally, it requires understanding that different environments require different approaches. What works in one space might limit you in another. So adaptability becomes key. Knowing when to be assertive, when to be calm, and when to step back completely. Because at the end of the day, the goal is not to remove strength, it is to refine it, to move from automatic defense to conscious control, to move from being driven by past experiences to being guided by present awareness. And once you reach that point, something changes. You realize that respect does not have to come from fear. It can come from clarity, from consistency, from how you carry yourself when there is no pressure to perform. Because now, when you look back at that original pattern, the one that seemed normal, the one that felt necessary, you start to see it differently, not as the only option, but as one path among many. And that realization gives you something powerful. It gives you choice. And once you have that choice, you are no longer just reacting to the world. You are shaping how you move through it. Most people assume that being respected means being intimidating, but what they are really seeing is a survival pattern built over time, where the mind learns that being calm is risky and being intense is safer, and what starts as protection slowly becomes a limitation, affecting how you connect, how you grow, and how you are perceived in different spaces. Because respect built on fear needs constant reinforcement, while real respect comes from control, consistency, and presence. And once you recognize that pattern, you reach a point where you can either keep repeating it or consciously choose to evolve beyond it.